Well, thank you so much, ladies, for being with us today. I am really excited about this interview. You guys are both just rock stars in your own areas, and I can't wait for you to speak on this topic. Would you guys take a minute to introduce yourself and tell us about your position, what you specifically do, and what that means for your county? So Jamie, let's go ahead and start with you first.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Jamie Bohler Smith. I am the Executive Director CEO for Visit Hendricks County. We are the county DMO for Hendricks County, just west of Indianapolis. I've been here a little over 23 years, and I've been the CEO for 11. And so here in Hendricks County, we have a mission. Our mission is really to connect visitors and communities together to increase the visitor economy. And so really for our approach, it's a little different. We really want to ensure that residents like where they live, and visitors have a reason to visit. And so our goal is to increase the things to do in the county for both residents and visitors.
I am Karen Radcliff, and I am President and CEO of Hamilton County Tourism. We're just north of Indianapolis, also a destination marketing organization, just like Jamie, and also doing some of the same things. We want to make sure that we also have a great destination so that visitors will come and visit and drive the economy. And a lot of times that falls into different markets, leisure markets, meetings and sales, sports, I think is what we're here to talk about today. And then to do that, we get into the destination development piece of that in order to build out the county and the area so that, like Jamie said, residents enjoy where they're living, but then also it's attractive to visitors.
Fantastic. And you guys both mentioned this, but Jamie, would you take a minute and explain the landscape for those that don't understand Indianapolis and the surrounding counties? Will you just take a minute and explain where each of your counties are? Mainly, I want us to realize and understand how close the two of your counties are.
Sure. So we're often referred to as the donut county. So if you think of Indianapolis as a circle, Indianapolis is the middle of the donut hole. And so years ago, everyone had some sort of brand or tagline that revolved around Indianapolis. And so for us, we were on the edge of excitement because we're just west of Indianapolis, just the left parenthetical, as you would say. And then Hamilton County, this was decades ago, so do know I am talking decades. Hamilton County was the simple side of Indianapolis. They were the frown, right? So they're on the north side of Indianapolis. And so we're really, there's 9 counties that surround Marion County that touch it in some way, shape, or form. There's about 6 that are the closest. So Hamilton County is directly north, we're directly west. Boone County is between the two of us, but really there's a community called Zionsville. It's a small town, and really it takes, if you're at the northernmost point of Hendricks County and the southernmost point of Cairns, you really just have to drive through Zionsville to get between the two of us. And that's about a 15-minute drive. So we're really super close, very similar in geographic size. We're also very similar in development. The edges that are closest to Marion County are the most developed. And in Hamilton County, as you go further north, you kind of hit a wall where it gets very rural. Same thing in Hendricks County, as you go further west, there's kind of a demarcation where it starts to get more rural. So in those two ways, we're similar. I will say we're governed very different. Hamilton County is incredibly progressive and has invested a lot in their infrastructure and their roadways and their transportation. Hendricks County is a lot more traditional. We have been very much more invested in housing and agriculture. So those are a little bit of the differences. But we do have the 800-pound gorilla in the middle with Indianapolis, which is a meetings and convention city. And so while it is there's quite a bit of tourism that goes on down there. It's kind of a amateur sports capital of the world. It is, currently 2025, and the Pacers just went to the national championship, so we're riding a bit of a high in the sports landscape. So, and we've had the Colts for decades, and we have the Fever right now with a very popular star. So we're very fortunate that a lot of headquarters have moved here. So we have a lot of, like, the NCAA is headquartered here, Bands of America. So we have a lot of sports in the area. And while that does cause some attrition for us, Hamilton County and Hendricks County are destinations in our own right. And our research shows that.
Yeah, excellent. That was an excellent explanation. Karen, can you tell us a little bit about, for your county in particular, how does youth sport play into the overall strategy for tourism in your county?
Well, we probably went into youth sports about 25 years ago. There were a couple things that were happening. Our hotels, we have a big corporate base up here, and our hotels and hospitality businesses were pretty busy Monday through Thursday, and they were dropping off on the weekends. And so they were looking to us to be leaders in how do I stimulate a weekend market for hospitality. The other thing that was happening, we were and still are one of the fastest growing areas in the United States. And so our parks departments were calling us as well, because they were getting calls asking from residents and other people asking to come to the parks, but they wanted a place to play for competition. They wanted baseball fields and they wanted soccer fields and those kinds of things. And most of our parks were passive, with hiking trails and nature areas and things like that. And so when we looked at that, so we saw a demand. We saw a demand and a need for competitive facilities. We also saw a need and a demand for, from our hotels, a demand for customers on the weekends. And so we put some of those things together and thought, why don't we try and see if we might be able to build a market for the weekends? The weekends look like, it's, anybody that's traveling on the weekends, if it's for leisure, for wedding, a reunion, anything like that. But then when we started dabbling in sport, we found out that this was just really breaking open. We have a lot of young families in the area moving here. They prioritized sport for their kiddos. And if we weren't going to build something and provide that from a civic standpoint, they were going to invest in facility on their own. So we saw a lot of momentum up here, and we've been driving it ever since.
Yeah, excellent. Now, I want to get into and explain a little bit that both of your communities, both of your counties made really specific decisions around youth sport facilities. Both were right for your specific county. And I think but they were different. Even though you guys are so close, your counties each decided something different. And I think that is such a powerful case study, if you would, for our students to learn and understand that even counties that are so close can make very different decisions, and they both can be right for their own counties. So for those students that are entering or thinking about entering into the youth sport landscape, I really want to hone in on what factors went into you guys deciding, your counties deciding to either build a facility or not to build a facility. Both are really valuable for students to understand if they want to do this in the future. So, Jamie, can you explain how the opportunity arose to think about bringing a sport facility to Hendricks County?
So we were about 10 years behind Hamilton County. So 2014, 2015. And so we were getting a significant amount of weekend business from the facility that was built in Hamilton County. We had an opposite problem at that point. We were full on the weekends and not through the week. So as I would admit that our organizations both were leaders in Indiana as being research-based organizations. We were certainly Hamilton County, and we were, charging behind, saying, "Wait for us." We're very much at the forefront of making sure that we were following consumer behavior, hotel trends, you know, real estate trends, really diving into how does a corporate business look at development and translating that into destination development. So we weren't just picking and choosing like, oh, this would be fun, we think people would like this. We were really diving into metrics, research, data that was just like a business investment. So we were really identifying the trends, the data, the research, looking at things like I said, occupancy in hotels, ADR, revenue per available room. We were looking at travel patterns. We were looking at spend. How much does a youth sports family spend when they come on a town? What is the travel party size? We learned very quickly in our instance that girls sports, it was a larger travel party size than boys sports, because they typically, the whole family comes for the girls, just one parent goes with the boys. So we learned quickly on that, how length of stay, those kinds of things really started playing into what kinds of avenues we wanted to pursue. And I would also say we also got very smart at the government incentives, right? So we started treating tourism investment much like you would economic investment. What tools do we have in our economic toolbox? TIF districts, economic incentives such as that. We've used things such as sewer line hookup fees waived, pilots, which are payments in lieu of taxes. So we had to start getting very creative about what those types of things look like. And so for us, when we started looking at youth sports, we were kind of thrust into it to bid on a Little League headquarter relocation in 2014, 2015. We didn't win that bid, so that really kind of, it was kind of we had a town that was like, we want to be the headquarters for the Little League. We weren't sure that was the right thing. So we kind of invested and looked at it for many, many years. And finally, about 2020, 2021, we really stepped back, looked at all those figures again. I was the CEO by this point, and we said, this doesn't make sense for us. We don't have availability on the weekend. We don't have enough incoming hotel rooms. We don't have enough available land for more hotels at this point. We were looking at a hockey arena. We had a group of people that wanted to put hockey in. We don't have the interest for hockey. It's a high income sport. We have a community that really wants to be a lot like some areas in Hamilton County. But honestly, a hockey arena makes so much more sense in Hamilton County based on the rooftops they have and the rooftops we have. And we are getting a tremendous amount of youth sports already. We have some private investment that already exists. We have a baseball facility that's owned by a private travel team. We have another private travel team that's looking to invest and upgrade a parks facility. So we've decided that's our role, is how do we connect the dots with those people. We're advertising at those facilities. We're creating partnerships with them, such as exclusive rights to promote our hotels at those facilities, and they can't sell advertising to other hotels. So we've gone about it in a different way that doesn't look like investing in facilities, partly because Hamilton County already has a facility. It doesn't really make sense for us to build something like that because we are already getting the attrition from a facility like that. We also have facilities to a county to the south of us, and that's really where we saw it come up, was in 2020. Indiana was open. A lot of other states were not. There's a community just south of us called Morgan County that's also one of those donut counties. They had a ton of baseball tournaments. They have 3 hotels total. And so we were very busy in 2020 because of youth baseball.
Yeah, that's an excellent explanation of what went into a decision for you. Karen, let's go to you. So a little bit earlier than where Jamie kind of started their explanation of for Hendricks County, when did it come into play? When did youth sport facilities come into play? And what went into you guys deciding whether or not you would go ahead and build these facilities?
Well, like I said, it was about 25 years ago. Fastest growing area in the United States, a younger population that demanded competitive sport facility for their kids. And it wasn't just one area and one sector that was building this. It was a number of different areas where they were building these things. And so it was, and there was a desire not only for rec sports, there was a desire for the next step up travel. And then there was a desire for the next step up for elite. And then now there's a desire for professional. And so it's just really the market is driving some of this stuff. Now, how do you get it done? And how did it came to be? Just various ways. For example, we have an iBeach volleyball facility, private sector. We have ice rinks, private sector. We have 2 basketball field houses, 3 actually, private sector purchased, or not purchased, but built. But then we also had parks developing. And so we have a park that has 5 or 6 different soccer fields. And we have a number of those like that. We have large recreational clubs that are nonprofits that are building their own facilities for rec kids. Schools. We have schools that are building large natatoriums. And it's not only a facility for the school, but it's also a facility for events. And we have cities then also building facilities, either for professional sports groups, or they're building for an amateur sport market as well. So it's different ways in which it's happening up in Hamilton County. And we just happen to be in the business for supporting, like Jamie was saying, supporting in all kinds of different ways. If it has an alignment with tourism, then we're very much interested in finding out what that alignment is and how we might be able to support. Our facility that's 400 acres that I think Jamie has referred to, it's called Grand Park. It's very large. It was the biggest multi-sport complex of its kind when we built that about 10 or 15 years ago. And it was the single most impactful tourism attraction that happened in Hamilton County. And it also impacted the region just because it was so big. And we scrambled for a couple of years after that, trying to figure out, well, how do we manage the disruption in the marketplace? It was a good disruption, but how do we manage that? And we have, but it happens, it's not just us fanning the flames. We're actually, doing our research and providing opportunity. If there are people saying, yeah, I'm interested, we'll do some feasibility studies around that. We will try and uncover if there's a market for that. And then if if it works, if the opportunity is there, and if there are people around the table who have some resources to apply, then sometimes it gets built, sometimes it doesn't. But it's been building, there's been a lot of built environment up here in Hamilton County around youth sport.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned that a lot of people were at the table and a lot of people had to be involved. I can only imagine with a facility or what do you guys call it? Do you call it a compound? It's huge.
The campus.
Campus. Okay, yeah, that's a lot better word.
Campus.
That's a lot better word. A campus. The entire campus. I mean, it's huge. So it had to have so many people involved in the decisions behind it. What was the tipping point, do you think, when you were looking at the feasibility studies, when you were looking at long-term sustainability? What was the tipping point at which you guys decided to, because I'm sure it was a risk, right? It was the first of its kind, or especially in our region. And so it was a risk to invest in something of this magnitude. Where do you think the tipping point was to make the decision to take that big risk?
Well, it's the resources. If there are resources, they're there. If you're able to financially pull it off, then once you discover that you've got the resources, then yes. So we were, when we were planning Grand Park, that was back during the Great Recession, and nothing was being built. Nothing was being built. People were sitting on land that wasn't being purchased. And so we actually had a lot of time to plan. We had the luxury of being able to plan. And because it was during the recession and people were hungry for business, we were able to option a lot of land at a very low cost. You just can't, unless you're out in the middle of nowhere, it just doesn't, it's not an option anymore. And that was probably the opportunity for us that made us go, yeah, this is the feasibility. We did about 3 or 4 feasibility studies around this. It was my job to go out and find people who would be around the table who would bring resources in, and that's either dollars or expertise or people, events. So brought all of those people around the table and thought, okay, we've got some land optioned, we've got some resources, we've got the people who are all willing to try hard and maybe come up with an agreement that's a handshake deal just to get it across the finish line, and we all trust each other because we all want the same thing at the end of the day. How might we do this? And so that's that tipping point, is it looked good on paper, the community wanted it, the leadership in that community wanted it. And then there were a lot of people from all over the United States who were telling us, we'd bring our teams there, we'd bring our events there. There were a number of clubs locally who said, we'll bring our headquarters there. And so when you have that kind of a momentum, then it's easier to take that risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Jamie, your county was in a completely different landscape than when you guys were looking at building facilities than Karen's county was at the time. They were in a recession. They had land. When you guys were looking at it, it sounds like you already had some influx of tourism on the weekends from this market. So what was your tipping point of saying it doesn't really make sense for us to take this on? What was that tipping point for you?
Well, we had some resources as well, and Karen mentioning that we had bought some land as well during the recession. We had a couple parcels in Plainfield, I had mentioned earlier that our occupancy was a different issue, right? So we were full on the weekends and we were not full through the week. So we saw that we didn't need to build sports facilities, but we needed conference facilities. And so we leaned in more so into the conference and meetings market. And so we decided that for our community, it made more sense to invest into a larger scale meeting facility. So for Hendricks County, that's where we chose to invest. And we did the same things. We gathered people around the table. We started having conversations. We did feasibility studies. And so we leaned into that opportunity. And in 2016, we created a deal with a local developer to redevelop a existing banquet facility that was 20 plus years old that had been neglected, for lack of a better term. And so purchased that property and decided to connect it to a brand new 175 room Embassy Suites property. So again, a lot of talking, a lot of people sitting around the table, and there was a lot of trust that had to be built. I think that's the biggest thing with these conversations is you have to get people to trust you. I spent a lot of time during those conversations just standing in people's offices, just being there, right? And letting them talk, letting them vent, letting them work through conversations in their head, and just being in the room when they wanted to have someone there. And so ultimately the Embassy Suites Hotel and Conference Center opened in 2019. And that was a project that was a collaboration between the town, the county, our organization, Visit Hendricks County, a couple different private developers, where the investment was for the conference center and a walkway that then connected to a brand new hotel. And so that decision, again, was based in research, based in need. It's right along I-70, just west of Indianapolis, and it was what was right for us. And then when we were working on the hockey facility, we did feasibility studies, and I think that's the role that destination organizations can really play when we talk about destination development. We're working with another group right now in Brownsburg, and like they need a traffic study, right? And a traffic study is like $5,000 to $8,000 depending on where it is, and 2025. Those are the kinds of things that we can invest in that benefit other businesses around it and can be a piece of the puzzle for development. And so, when we do those types of things, and we were looking at hockey, it was becoming very, very clear that hockey wasn't going to be the right thing for us. So we switched that feasibility study and became, okay, well, what would work, right? So instead of just checking the feasibility of hockey, let's check the feasibility of any type of sports facility. And so then it became, okay, well, you could do 8 hard courts and 2 pieces of turf. You could do 16 volleyball courts. You could do this, this, and this. And so I have a study sitting on my shelf that says that, but it's on a very narrow piece of land. It's landlocked. Like there's all kinds of other things that go into it. And then, so we've got studies sitting on the shelf that if we do decide that's a market we want to go into, we can, but we have to be very aware of what's going on around us. I mentioned that county, that Boone County that sits between Hamilton County and Hendricks County. They've invested in hard court and turf, and it's doing very, very well. I would say it's far more local. We're not seeing a lot of tournaments up there, but it's doing great. They don't have any hotels. It's not driving a lot of visitor traffic yet, but there's plenty of hotels to stay 10 minutes down the road in Hamilton County. So I'm sure nobody's minding it at this point. So, it's hard to, it's hard to invest in youth sports when the private sector's making it up at the moment. But the developers always show up and with their hand out, and they would love for us to give them tons of money to build things. So I think that's for us. We decided that the investment made more sense in a different market. And I think that was the right thing at the right time. And, I still stand by that decision. And, I'm sure there's people that are still mad that we don't have hockey, but those three people can drive to Hamilton County.
Those three people. That's fantastic. I love this. I love what you two have both described so eloquently, especially for students as they're thinking about what. You can't just say, like, I want to have a facility, I'm going to build a facility. I mean, you definitely can, but the sustainability of that facility is really what should drive the conversation of if it's a right choice. So I love the fact that both of you discussed how so many things went into it, and both decisions were right for each of your counties. And for our students, I want them to take away from this that if this is a field that you want to go into in terms of building these facilities, you really have to think about the community's need and availability and if it makes sense for them. So that is so fantastic. Is there anything, Karen, that would have completely changed the game and would have said, like, nope, like, we can't, actually, this is not going to work? Is there any one or two things that if it went wrong, it could be a completely different Westfield today?
Well, we shopped that idea around to a few of our cities, honestly, before Westfield said, yes, pick me, we'll do this, we'll figure it out. And they each determined, for whatever reason, just like Jamie's community, it's just not right for us, or it's not the right time for us. As far as Westfield, would there be a reason why they did not build Grand Park? Yeah, if the money wasn't there, honestly. I mean, you can't really build something if you don't have the resources. So even though we had a lot of people around the table saying, yes, we can't wait to do this, we'd love to have a big event facility where we can play ball. And that's all well and good, but if you just don't have the resources, it's not going to happen. It just, like I said, it just was a opportune time that you don't get to see very often. And they happened to have some resources from the city. They just sold a public utility. We had some resources at tourism that we were able to help jumpstart some of the build. And like I said, the land, we were able to option the land at a pretty low cost. So if those things hadn't have all come together at the same time, it would have been a much different facility, for sure.
Yeah, such a great insight. Jamie, how about you? Is there anything that could have tipped the scales to make your community say yes to a facility that you currently said no to?
Certainly the research had been different, right? If the research had said that it was a viable facility that would make money, it didn't say that. That's number one. Number two, if there had been larger private investment, I think would be different. If it had been a different piece of land, possibly. I just don't think it's the right time. And if we were somewhere else, right? If we weren't 45 minutes from Grand Park, I think it's a possibility. There's some really fantastic facilities in Kentucky. I think it's called Rocky Top. Again, they're 6 hours from Grand Park, and they do excellent. There's some in Alabama. I think you have to really take into account your location and where are people willing to drive and what are they willing to do. And, that's tourism in a nutshell, right? When you're talking about group travel. And I think that one thing that Indianapolis, Central Indiana does is works well as a region. And as a region, it just doesn't make sense to build another, multi-sport facility like that. It's not feasible to put that over here. We already have a ton of volleyball, right? We're doing quite a bit of volleyball. That would make the most sense. But again, it's that would be the next thing I think we would look at is volleyball. And if we did that, and I could have seen if we had been looking at volleyball, that might have tipped the scales in a different way.
Interesting. Karen, how has your personal experience in youth sport informed the work that you do now, whether that be family experiences, personal experiences, friend experience, whatever it may be? How does your experience in youth sport help drive your current position with youth sport?
Well, at the end of the day, I'm a marketer, and so I'm trying to drive sales, and that's kind of what drives me right now is driving the economy. I have a different hat on where I'm doing I'm sustaining, a destination as well instead of just always looking at growth. But right now, I think sport, for my position, what I'm trying to do is understand where sport is going in our county, how it aligns with our mission, and what our communities desire. And it's one of the biggest markets in terms of desire for Hamilton County. And so in my position, then I need to make sure that I am supporting that desire and supporting that momentum. And so it's everything from finding the right people and staff with some expertise to be able to grow that market, to support that market. It's building a budget for that department so that they have the resources to be able to, execute their plans. It is building some grant dollars for some of the community so that if we continue to keep our local clubs strong, then that just feeds the tourism market, because then we have clubs who will play in some of these events. We have referees and officials who are here locally who could support a travel event. We have facility that if we need some facilities to host an event, we've got that as well. So it's finding grant dollars to support the market as well. And then it's also building up some incentive funds and some bid dollars, because it takes money to bring in a lot of these events, and you're competing with communities with their own sports facilities all across the United States. And so you have to make it attractive for some of these events. And right now, we are, just like Jamie was saying, I'm busy on the weekends. We're busy in the summertime. So late spring, all summer long, early fall, we're good. We don't really need to be incentivizing business. So then I put my hat on going, okay, what do I need to do to flatten out the calendar a little bit and to make sure that we're actually incentivizing and going into fall and winter activities that will help our businesses stay afloat during a slower period. So it's more strategic now rather than parking cars, which I used to. I used to basketball events, I'd be out there parking cars and getting people there, or running local organizing committees and helping out with the operations, doing a lot of marketing and sales. I used to do a lot of that around sport. But now it's being more strategic in how do we grow this business of sport.
Excellent. Jamie, how about you? How does your personal experience in youth sport inform the decisions that you make around youth sport in your position?
I'd say where we are today as an organization, we're overhauling our strategy. I think I would say we've gone into this destination defined program. what we're calling destination defined. And so we've got 4 pillars, and one of them is awareness and marketing. We have overhauled our entire staff. We have nobody currently on my staff today. I'm the only one that has the same titles as I had 6 months ago. So, and I would say over 50% of them are brand new. So we're doing some stuff. So it's a thing. And so with that being said, when I travel for youth sports, and like this weekend, my son is currently 15, plays 15U. And so Friday I had to take the day off. So I take Friday off. So I took vacation day. We went to Jennings County, which is an 1.5-hour drive for me, almost 2 hours. We got a hotel room in Columbus. Oh, we played in Columbus. Sorry, we played in Columbus on Friday. So I got a hotel room in Columbus. My daughter went. We stayed in a hotel room, had dinner at Texas Roadhouse, and then just sat in the hotel room for Thursday night. Played on Friday, came home Friday. My husband, the game moved to Jennings County on Saturday. And so, my husband found a coffee shop. Like, that's the part that I think we need to figure out. Like, we've got hundreds and hundreds of parents coming as well. And what's frustrating to me is these tournaments are insular, right? We're struggling a little bit with how do we get information into the hands of these people that, I'm not going to the gas station and getting snacks in that hour window where I've dropped my kid off and I have an hour before the game starts, right? They're paying $15, $20 for the weekend. They're paying, hundreds of dollars for hotel rooms. They shouldn't have to eat at a gas station, and they shouldn't have to eat at Texas Roadhouse if they would rather eat at a local restaurant. So trying to cross that bridge without a sports authority, Hamilton County has a dedicated staff for just sports. How do we cross that gap so that the parents that want to have a local experience can get to that? Or if they enjoy the community, my husband had an energy drink at this little coffee shop in Jennings County and came home, and he knows what I do, right? Like, I run a DMO in middle of Indiana. And he's like, I would live there. I'm like, what? Like, because of a little coffee shop. He was like, the square was super cute. I'm like, have you been to Danville, which is where we live, right? And I'm like, he's like, it's no different. But he was so impressed with this little town that he saw because of a baseball tournament, right? And so if we can lean into that a little more, we've got several hundred people coming to Brownsburg every weekend with the Canes Midwest facility now. And so how do we get them to go the extra 5 miles into Brownsburg, have ice cream, grab a soda, instead of stopping at the first Speedway gas station that they see? So that's the piece that I think we need to connect as a DMO. It's why we're building that relationship with them. It needs to be better. I don't want to have a booth. That's not how we do it anymore. But like, how do we use technology? How do we use geofencing? How do we use QR codes? How does that marketing lean in to get people where they're at to if they're going to be at the Canes every weekend with their 9U kid, how do we get them to find a favorite spot to get a soda, to get ice cream, to get a coffee, etc. And then maybe someday, if they're ever having to move, they can say, you know what, remember when we were in Brownsburg, they had really great baseball facilities. I really liked that little town. There was that neighborhood we always passed. And then someday maybe they become a resident. So that's the piece that I think we're missing, that we need to look at connecting. Because that's, at the end of the day, we used to say, I want people to come here, spend money, and leave. I don't want them to affect our services. I don't want, a police run. I don't want them putting potholes on our road. But I think nowadays, as someone who's responsible for the visitor economy leads to the resident tax base, right? Because nobody who moves here doesn't visit first. And so I think that's the piece of it. And, we're staring at all these youth sports, that whether they're the kids, the parents, the grandparents, the aunts, the uncles, the neighbors, they're visiting, and they're all potential residents. So I think there's an opportunity there to think about that in a different way.
That's really cool. That's a great answer. Okay, last question. Favorite coach of all time? Karen, who would you say?
It's so funny because a lot of my job is sport, and I don't follow sport that much. Which is very ironic. But I tell you what, I guess my favorite coach, and I didn't really play sports when I was younger. But I was a statistician with a girls' high school basketball team, and the coach there probably was my favorite coach of all time. Girls' high school basketball.
Yes. Jamie, how about you? Who's your favorite coach of all time?
I saw this on here and I was like, oh man. I'm like, I don't know if I could name, like, I swam, but I didn't like my coach. I managed track and I didn't like them either. Apparently I have a problem with authority. And and I was like, well, thinking of like popular coaches, but really when I got down to it, I'm a mom, right? I've mentioned my kids. My son has a football coach, and he has coached him. His name is Justin Wilson, and my son plays football as well as baseball. And when he was in kindergarten, we watched the homecoming parade, and my son was mad that he wasn't in the parade. I said, well, you got to play football to be in the parade. And he's like, well, I'm playing football. And so in first grade, he joined a football team, and this man, Justin Wilson, was his coach. And he has been his coach all the way through. And now as a sophomore in high school, Justin is the offensive coordinator for Tri-West High School. And this man adores these boys. And I have never seen someone give and give and give and give, and just impressive, right? And I think those are the kind of men that need to be around young boys, and someone that they see give commitment like that is pretty impressive.
Yeah. What I love about this question is 99% of the time I've asked this question, people that are in sport, you guys aren't directly in sport, but people that are in sport, that they do this every day, 99% of the time, they name a youth sport coach of some kind. And you both did that as well. And so I love to bring that in to understand and to communicate to our students that the power and the impact that can be had through youth sports, the importance of youth sports as a whole. And you guys both showed that with your answers without even knowing. So thank you guys both so much for your time and your expertise and your insight. This was so enlightening, I think, for our students, and our students, I think, will gain a lot from this. And thank you so much for taking the time to do this today.